go ahead and call the meeting to order. Note attendance. Tim's out sick this evening. We have the first action item. We have a approved employment of Crystal Johnson at Robert Frost for LRC. You have a motion?
So moved.
Moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. A couple of discussion items. First is the Safe Route to Schools study report.
I'm going to spend a few minutes on this with you. Each one of you received a copy of the Safe Routes to School final reports, which were finalized in late January, early February. And those reports were part of the study for the renewal of the Transportation System Development Plan for the City of Silverton. So I know I've received one question from a community member about why we aren't doing Safe Routes to School studies at all of our schools. Well, because it coincides with the TSP renewal for the City of Silverton. And so they assume some of the responsibility for the Fort schools which are in the city. So that's just an important distinction to make. Realistically, I think that the uniqueness of the City of Silverton with biking and pedestrian and walking is one of a kind as compared to the majority of our rural schools.
I assume the city paid for this?
We paid for a portion of it, the city paid for it. We split 50-50.
Okay.
So I want to follow your lead on this. I ask that you each take a look at the recommendations on each one of the reports and also take a look at the current conditions that are there. And I think it's important to share that this information, by the way, will be incorporated with the TSP, but is also to be used by you and actually by the school district for planning efforts. As an example, Lauren Stanley has seen all of these and he's considering adding some budget items to help him meet some of these recommendations. You'll also note that many of the recommendations are specific to the City of Silverton. So unless you're willing to come up with a whole bunch of money and give it to the city, which I doubt, the responsibility really falls upon them over time and planning. And I think it's also, again, before I go into this, fair to say that the city has systems in place for anticipated changes such as improved intersections, sidewalks, bike paths, etc., with systems development charges. You paid $150,000 to the City of Silverton to reactivate Silverton Middle School as an SDC for traffic transportation impact. And while that money has not been applied to intersection improvements and things of that sort, it's part of the process that the city uses based upon their ordinance to put that money aside until at such a time that they invest in these kind of improvements. So some of these are new, some of them are not so new, but I just want to take a few minutes and highlight some. I'll highlight each one of the slides on the wall for the public here in attendance and also for you folks. So the first one is Mark Twain Elementary, and I think it's interesting to note also on all of these that the folks who did this was Alta Planning, I can't remember which engineering firm in the City of Silverton, were actually very complimentary of the school district in many ways with being able to get kids to and from schools with some facilities that are 50, 60, 75 years old in some cases and have limitations. And so, but they do have some recommendations. Mark Twain's Elementary, there were some recommendations about paint and signage to restrict parking along the main drive. On Robinson Street to build a sidewalk egress from, can't see it here, but in the front, this is, by the way, you see the cursor, this is Church Street, but to build a sidewalk egress from the front parking lot up here to Church to that sidewalk, which then goes I guess that'd be east for any kids that may be walking home. They just saw that as a potential risk because kids have to cross a very, very wet and grassy and area that could be slippery for them and unsafe. And then improved gravel lot on the southwest corner of the school. I know, Wally, you remember this, but we created this gravel lot probably 15 years ago, and that was needed at the time as a middle school. The recommendation based on this group is to improve this with potentially additional paving paving at some point. They did recommend that we place in there wheel stops, even as a gravel lot, that we put wheel stops in here to help better manage the flow of traffic that comes in and out of there. Since then, this was by the way in mid-October, since then Greg Kotz has done a nice job with his staff of having staff members down there and conditioning parents through communication and people who are on duty at the time to manage that traffic flow. So I think even since mid-October, there's been some attempts at improving that.
It was just an observation was when I was there, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago, I was the only one parking in that parking lot. So it's
After school or before school?
It's before school.
Yeah, before school is a little different story.
Okay.
But that's staggered. After school, that parking lot is nearly full.
Okay.
Yeah. And most of our schools, if you can envision this, since there's staggered drop-off, generally speaking, many of the issues are somewhat sort of heightened after school because everybody's coming at once. So that's where you see the largest impact. You'll see that with each others as well. There are quite a few recommendations, again, specific to the city. And I do want to make one very distinct point, and that is in all of the recommendations, with the exception of Robert Frost, the Safe Routes to School study identifies the corner of Jefferson Street and Highway 214, which you cannot see in this illustration, but it would be over here. When we get to the middle school, you'll be able to get a better sense. But that is a state-controlled highway where students, if they come to from across town and come to the elementary school, it's a dangerous crossing. There's no pedestrian crossing designation there, or bicycle safety route, anything of that sort. So you'll see that as we go through each one of these reports. So that's Mark Twain Elementary. The second report was specific to Silverton Middle School. And by the way, all of these reports will be on the district website prior to the end of this week, so the full public will be able to see these. So Silverton Middle School, which again you'll identify very, very quickly. I think a couple of the recommendations here that again specific to the school district, where and this, by the way, I was pleased, but let me say this first, is that the circulation on the school grounds currently operates well. So here we opened this thing last fall, and we put a fair amount of time into traffic flow, and while we had only the resources in place that we had, the fact that we used this former student parking lot as a parent drop-off and pickup, they were very pleased to see that. And at the end of the day, admittedly, it gets backed up, but if we didn't have that, imagine what a mess we would have.
But the backup there isn't a bad thing, because people pull aside, and if your child comes and gets in the car, you can pull around and get right out.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, you notice that when you visit there, I'm sure. All right. A couple of other things. So is use paint to prohibit parking along the north row stalls of the parking lot. So that would be in this area, because parents enter here, they circle around, and then they pick up or drop off here. So they encourage us to put some additional signage in here to better communicate to parents. Again, similar to Mark Twain Elementary, I think Nancy Griffith has done a good job of help conditioning her staff. She does have 2 or 3 staff members on duty out there, and over time parents have become conditioned to what to do. So it seems to be flowing better now than it did in October. And build a fence with a lockable gate around the bike parking area to provide additional security, and that's in this area right here. That is completed. So I'm pleased with that. Otherwise, the other recommendations are specific to the city. Construct curb ramps for sidewalks along Brown Street, which is along here. Sign restricting parking on Brown Street during school hours, which we've had a little conversation with the city, and actually I've had a conversation with a couple of neighbors on Brown Street. It's not going anywhere at this point, because again, I believe the system is working as well as possible, but that could be a consideration in the future. The other recommendation, as I mentioned about Mark Twain Elementary, is the recommendation to do something at the corner of Jefferson Street and Highway 214. And this is most notable for these kids because they walk down here up to Jefferson. I'll take a minute and pause right there and let you know that this is not a new problem. Well, there haven't been high prevalence of pedestrian accidents or incidents there. The fact is it is high risk. We've noticed that, or noted that for years, even before the middle school came in. We intentionally have bus kids from the area of Mill Street and Lincoln, that area, to Silverton High School, even to Eugene Field School when it was open, because we don't want any kids crossing the highway. We don't want any kids crossing the railroad tracks. And so until something that's approved and appropriate is installed, we'll continue as a school district to pay the additional amount of money to have routes that go in there. Keep in mind, state law requires that we're only required to provide transportation for kids, elementary kids who live more than a mile away from campus, and high school kids that live a mile away and a half away from campus. Well, that area across for Jefferson Street and the highway is distinctly less than a mile from campus, but we've chosen for years to provide that bus transportation. I think it's the right thing to continue to do. And there are many, many dynamics in play about what, when, and how that intersection can be improved. I will share with you that if that intersection is, when it gets improved, not if, and when it does, and I believe it needs to at some point in the future as well, there will be an obligation by the city and possibly by the school district to improve the walking area, sidewalks, and bike access all along Jefferson Street, which goes east-west, and along James Street, which goes north-south. And if you recall, part of our land use planning agreement with the city of Silverton was not only the SDC of $150,000 for improvement to the intersections and areas around there, but it was also giving permission for the city to use approximately 10 feet of school district property on the east side of James Street, clear from the middle school all the way up to Jefferson Street, for expansion of sidewalks and bicycle lanes the day that it's improved, because we will have to give up some of our property for that, and that was part of our agreement, a condition of use by the city of Silverton for us to activate the middle school. So that's also in place. So two pretty significant steps are there for that improvement, and you know what the third significant step is, and that's the few $100,000 that it's going to take to put all of that in at some point in time in the future. But it is about safety, and this really does draw a lot more attention to that.
Yeah, that's a really busy highway, obviously, to get across, and the mention of an overpass.
Right.
You know, even if you had great stoplights and crosswalks, the idea of parents saying, go ahead and walk across that busy street is not gonna encourage parents to say, go ahead and walk to school.
No, I agree.
You know, but an overpass is expensive, but it would certainly link the two sides of the city together wonderfully, but.
There was actually a state transportation grant submitted by the planning director about 8 years ago from the city of Silverton, and we agreed to at the time to allow this to happen, but it would have allowed just that, Tom, a bridge or arch across the railroad tracks, and it would go from the school district property, land somewhere around, I think, McDonald's or just north of Les Schwab, somewhere, it would have come out onto, and it would have been great. And there are areas, you know, to access the sidewalk there, much more than at Jefferson Street and 214.
A few $100,000.
Yes, yeah, obviously. We
Lots of ideas, no money.
I'll throw another thing in there. I sent you guys all just some personal observation that I took some pictures today. Another area, it's kind of loosely called out here on James Street, the intersection of James and C. That one concerns me a bit. I have personal knowledge of falling there myself into 3/4 minus with my hands and my shins, so that wasn't fun. But pictures I took are pretty telling, and you've got the sidewalk. If you're coming south on James, it's kind of underneath the ledge and then farther south. If you're coming on the west side of James going south, you've got brand new sidewalk that the city had done, and they stopped short right of the railroad tracks, right? And Andy and I were discussing a little bit before about how many bureaucracies are involved with that next 20 feet or 40 feet of strip of land there in order to make an effective sidewalk there. But you have gravel, you've got a narrowing kind of path, you've got traffic, you've got railroad tracks that are that tall that are easily tripped over. And then you've got a corner there with a nice crosswalk there right by the fast food restaurants, but there's really no effective sidewalk there. To stand there and wait to cross that intersection, it's pretty dangerous. So that's a real concern I know for me, and I took 4 or 5 different pictures from different angles, and cars coming into the bike lane where kids would be standing to try to access that that crosswalk. So that one concerns me a lot, and I know that's kind of almost like a bureaucratic hotbed right there, because we probably have 5 different agencies, including the school district, involved on that. But it's a problem, and you know, I've seen people almost get hit there myself, because people just don't slow down. And I know we want to route things towards Water and Brown Street, but you know, gosh, it's a usable spot, but
People are going to take the shortest route.
of course.
We've had problems with kids crossing the railroad tracks for years back here,
Yeah,
even though we tell them not to.
jumping the fence.
Yeah.
But that one,
Because it's the shortest route.
yeah, but that one does concern me, because it is a. You've got the stairs that are coming down behind the hospital there that come right down, right off that hill, right down by the car wash and then the fast food restaurants. So they can walk right there. I know my daughter, when she walks home from school, she takes that route too. So. It's a concern for me, and I took some pictures to share with you guys. So it's one to kind of think about, and I think to call out even more that's not specifically called out this plan.
Can you share that with the city, Andy? Can you share those pictures and the concern?
I absolutely will.
Might be good for us to discuss with the joint city council meeting. I know that's one,
I think that'd
but
be a great
That's a great topic.
and it's a real dangerous one. So
Robert Frost School was also considered, and Robert Frost School had a few recommendations, fewer from city-specific, and a few that were from the district, or for the district. Again, they thought it was operated well throughout the audit, but there were some recommendations that we can surely help with, and one of those includes working with the city to improve visibility. There's some vegetation at the intersection of Westfield Street and South Street. And again, not that we would do that, but we would support the city in helping to get that done. There's also a recommendation to widening the west side sidewalk on Westfield Street between the Baptist Church driveway and Center Street. That's about, well, here's the Baptist Church right there and Center Street. So in this area, the problem is walkers generally have a pretty safe access with one exception, and that's the entrance into the Safeway parking lot. But bicycle riders going down Westfield Street can be really quite dangerous at times. So there's no sidewalk on this side, there are no designated bike paths. Kids, for the most part, have defaulted to riding on the sidewalk, which admittedly, may not be the first choice, but it's probably the safest choice for kids. But there was some consideration, recommendation, as you'll see here, in working with the owners of this property, with the school district, in seeing if that stop sign can be set back a little bit further, because right now cars come clear out to Westfield Street and would literally block the way of a student that was coming down on the sidewalk. And thankfully it's never happened, but a student could surely run into the side of a car that is just waiting at the stop sign. And so that's something we intend to pursue as well.
I don't think there's a decent bike lane until you get past that crosswalk on the right-hand side, or on the east side of Westfield going down the hill till you're
Correct.
Where that number 2.
Get close to the intersection.
That's about the only spot where there's a decent bike lane in the street. It seems to be that this might, I hate to say use the term best, but this is one of the better layout of all of the studies. Of the 4 that we've got in front of us, this seems to be most well laid out, and obviously this one's kind of decent street with a little bit better planning, obviously.
Sure.
When this facility was built.
And there's been some significant improvements to Westfield over the last 10 years. Some widening, some addition of sidewalks, clear out to the highway, beyond the senior center even. Now we have no kids that go out that way, if I'm not mistaken. But and then finally is Silverton High School, which again, while it's a relatively new campus, again, not unexpectedly, there were, in fact, they referred to this as quite efficient operation. Circulation during the morning drop-off operated efficiently. Doesn't mean that it's perfect. I think we've all been on Grant Street, especially in the afternoon, and understand that could be quite an interesting situation there when kids are being picked up and dropped off. However, they did come up with a few recommendations, and that's to install stop lines and pavement markings at the stop sign in the main parking lot. So that's in this area, to sign the north side of the school district for no drop off, and that's along here as well. As expected, and human nature is as it is, we have parents who bypass or just ignore the drop-off here and drive onto campus, and you see them every day after school. They're lined up all along these areas waiting for kids, and generally speaking, it works. They have to wait for a few minutes, but again, the beauty of it is that we're able to we do everything that we can to get parents off of the streets and onto school district property when we pick up and drop off kids. That's the best route to go, and the high school design allowed for that to happen. I think in hindsight, we have realized, and this is unrelated to this study, but we have realized that the parking at the high school, especially for student parking, is we're discovering is likely insufficient, that we should have installed another 100 spots or so on the high school campus. And so thankfully, you've acquired the Grant Street property, just north of this property, right there, and that will allow you, as we can, to be able to at least create some additional parking there, overflow parking for students and for events. And then there are just a number of city recommendations, and once again, the Jefferson Street and Highway 214 recommendation is included in the study. So this is a valuable piece of information. All four of these studies are valuable. I think they will help us as we plan for the future around all four of these schools. To complement one of Aaron's comments just a minute ago, though, I think it's important to remember that studies like this need to be considered in concert with things like the renewed transportation system development plan that is expected to come out by the city of Silverton this fall, and the West Side land use development plan, which was approved by the city of Silverton, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, and that's on their website. You referred to that actually during a recent work session when you had a property owner talking to you about that property next to Robert Frost School. But all three of those documents really need to be considered in and amongst each other as decisions are made with all of these areas as we move into the future. From a school district perspective, we're going to do what we can to include these in the school budgets over the next year or two, or whatever it takes in order to make these a priority and get them done. So,
Great. I think in addition to this is good information, but I think, I'm sure Lauren's already doing it, but taking a look at the rest of the schools and seeing what opportunities are out there to improve safety.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that, like specifically, we do have, there's Prattam, there's Silvercrest, there's some hamlets out there, there's Scotts Mills.
Right.
Which is a city, and as I got kids and parents that go out there that know a lot of them, there's the path that links the town to the school. And really all it is just a gravel path, but people have talked about, wouldn't it be nicer if it was wider? And right now there's not a lot of traffic, but in 20, 30 years, there could be a lot more. And so it's important to lay the marker down now that we're gonna need a good wide path that's gonna invite kids to walk, and save transportation on everybody's, and what I really, the thing that really stood out, what was it, the statistic in here about in one generation back in, what was it, 69, 48% of the kids rode their bike or walked to school. That was in 69, and in 2009, just 40 years later, it's only 13%.
Sure.
And wouldn't it be nice if those kids were getting that exercise? And so we need to, when there's opportunities to right now, we don't have setbacks, we don't have good bike paths, we don't have good walking paths that are separate from the traffic. But as you see developments coming, make sure you get the marker down there and say, give us some room for a bike path, for a good separate bike path. It's not like right next to busy traffic, but actually separate. And there's an opportunity in that town to do it, and I don't know, what the other communities have, but it's important to. So how did this study came about? Because of a review that the city of Silverton had to do. So is there something like that coming for Scotts Mills in the future?
I'd have to ask that question of the city staff at Scotts Mill to find out if they are also doing a transportation systems plan. I don't know if they've done one, if they have one. City of Silverton clearly has one, and this is a renewal of that plan.
Right, it's probably the county, but there is, that concern in Scotts Mills has been raised, and they talk about, as more infill occurs in Scotts Mills, there's lots of vacant lots. It's going to get busier, and now is the time to say, let's have a nice path that links to town.
And as I think of that, again, using Scotts Mills as an example, that the school, our school is within the city limits of Scotts Mills,
Yes.
so it's under that jurisdiction.
Well, it is separate though from, but yes,
It is, but yeah, there's city water that goes out there and all
Right,
of that.
right.
But there's some development going on out there, just as an example, and haven't asked that question of the Scotts Mills
Yeah.
governance or staff to find out if a systems development charge was assessed, let's say for those homes along there at some point in time, that width be added, like you
Something to think
suggest.
about, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, but Tom, that piece from the school to the road by the fire station, what's that road?
I don't know.
Because I just put that water line in last year, and that was included in the plan, is that we had to widen that out.
Okay, good.
So it's been
Just to make sure to check and make
some
sure. 'cause-
forethought that there's,
Good.
it's like 8 foot wide, and we had to rock the whole way, so.
Good. That's, well, yeah, but it's good to make sure that we're taking the opportunity now
Yeah.
to identify them, because if somebody just forgets it out of convenience, like, oh no, we don't have good room for bikes and walking paths and all that, so, good.
Good input,
Good.
thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments? All right, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right, move on to district goals and strategic visioning plan. Jennifer?
In front of you, you have the performance indicators and where we are currently with those. So your first performance indicator, 100% of teachers will meet or exceed the district standard for student engagement. This is exactly the same data you got last spring. That is because while administrators are collecting evidence and doing observations, we don't rate teachers until the end of the year. So that won't update until the end of the year. You landed last spring at 82.8%. Our goal for this spring is 90%. And I am optimistic that we'll get close to that. Any questions on that one? Okay, flip. On track to graduate. So that is where we currently are by grade level, if you look at the chart, in terms of students meeting those growth goals. So I'll give you a minute to look over that. We're looking for 93% on track.
What's going on with 8th grade math? It's,
So when you're looking at on track to meet that goal, you're looking at mastering all of the concepts that are assessed for 8th grade at the end of the year. So this is mid-year and some of those concepts haven't been taught yet. So I hesitate to, especially in the math, to even put that on there. But that's where they are right now.
wow,
You'll see them jump, yeah.
there's not that much time left.
But this was, remember, end of January. So this is a mid-year report. So they would have jumped even from this.
Okay.
Yeah. I also, though, will say that if you look at the 8th graders across the board in reading and math, that there's probably an element of 8th grade test taking there of, I don't have to push the right button.
Understand.
I do think that like with the reading score, they're at 69%. They are much higher than that. And when I let them know that the high school English department will place them based on their STAR test score, that number will jump significantly.
I've heard that happening.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
They cancel WIP because they don't think it means anything.
Right,
It does.
right. Yeah, and schools are getting a lot better at making that data relevant to kids so that they're taking the test seriously, but we're still struggling a little bit with 8th graders and how to make that data relevant to them so that they feel like the test means something and they're giving their best effort.
Yeah, it's hard, because I hear stories of them just going like, yeah, whatever, just
Yes,
to get,
exactly.
just so they can
Right.
get done.
It skews my data. I don't
I know.
appreciate that.
Not good.
But that's up to, the schools and the teachers are working
Yeah.
to make sure that that information is relevant to the kids, that they use that information for something and they see what it's used for, and then you will see those scores go up, for
Makes
sure.
sense.
So this was January, then are we gonna
It's
see,
January.
the test scores from the end of the year then?
Yeah, yeah, this is just the mid-year check.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
so they will be much higher. And then first grade, we have an issue in first grade with the assessment that we use. we moved them out of an early literacy test into a reading test and a math test that requires reading. And the fluency is not quite there, they're not quite fast enough, it's a timed test, they get 30 seconds per question. So if they aren't reading quickly enough, they time out of a question and it looks like they don't know the material when in fact they may. So on the last one, when we pull our spring test, we're going to turn those timers off so you can see really what they can do without fluency impacting that score. Any questions about those for 1st through 8th, star reading and math? Okay. Then the kindergarten assessment data is exactly what you saw last year. We won't have another score for them until June to be able to look at what their growth was. But full day kindergarten, we had almost 95% of our kids meeting or exceeding, so we count that as a success. And then the performance indicator for high school freshmen is that they are on track to get 6 credits by the end of their freshman year, and 98% of them are on track to do that.
That's awesome. Good progress.
Any questions on any of those academic on track to graduate performance indicators? So let's flip to attendance if no. And the attendance scores, we're looking for 85% and 85% consecutively in those 2 performance indicators, and we are closer than we have been, which is surprising, honestly, with the snow and all of the flu that has gone around, but we are struggling in those areas. So K-5, 76%, 78 for K-8, 70 for 9-12.
You know, it's a double-edged sword. I've struggled in my mind with that a bit, because we want the kids here for school, obviously, but
Right.
we don't want them here if they're sick, so.
I know. We don't want them contagious.
Yeah, and I've heard kids showing up for school because there's a prize there waiting for them if they show up, and they
Yeah,
really shouldn't be here.
yeah. I think this is the one the administrative team is struggling with the most as well, because we, that's a hard number to move for us for some reason. We'll have to continue to have conversations about how to impact this attendance rate.
Obviously, this is a crazy question, but not crazy. You're digging in obviously into why. Is there any indicators as to why, like, just off the top of your head? Or
For
just...
the most part, it's kids excused for illness. And for the most part, I mean, around 25 to 30% of the kids, it's a specific group of kids. It's not the kids in general. So the high numbers of absences are with a smaller percentage of kids in general.
They chronically have illness
They're
issues?
making
or-
9 absences or less. But the chronic absenteeism kind of kills your percentages overall.
Do we need to change the metric to account for that?
We could pull those out and say, you know, we could do a metric of chronic absenteeism and put them in another category and measure everybody else separately.
It's a
We still
thought,
need to
I don't know,
address-
but we really don't want kids here when they're sick.
Well, I would say chronic illness. You know, that's something that the child or the parents can't control. But, you know, if there's some other reason a kid doesn't want to go to school and the parents don't feel motivated to take them, well, that's something maybe society can work to change. But if the kid's sick, the kid's sick.
Well, what are the top 3 to 4 reasons they're missing school?
Yeah.
Illness is one. What's the other ones? And then, because obviously the illness thing we can't influence, but we can influence other things. You know.
Our high school staff would say motivation to come to school, which they most often attribute to anxiety. And our high school staff is working to address that issue. It's not exclusive to high school, but you can see that the high school attendance rate is lower, significantly lower than other schools.
Anxiety due to academics, life isn't. Sorry, I don't mean to keep asking why.
You know,
but-
I don't feel like I should speak to that. They have an attendance team in place at the high school that's breaking that down kid by kid. So I could pull that for the end of the year report, kind of what they're finding, but I don't want to give you numbers that are off.
That's
That'd be great to include that data, though.
Yeah.
Hey, Aaron. So my daughter tends to be sick on the days her first period has an exam. And I'm sure she's not alone with that.
imagine that.
Yeah, so anecdotal at least.
The trend is the trend line's going the right way.
It is, yeah. It's
Yeah.
just not as fast as we want it to go. But it is going the right way at this
Yes.
point, yes.
Directionally correct.
All right, any other questions? Anything else, Jennifer? Is that it? All right,
That's all for me.
okay. Well,
Wally,
Yeah.
I'll comment just briefly on
Sure.
goal number 2 and goal number 3, just as a mid-year check. And again, you're aware of this, but for the sake of the public, or those that maybe watched it on tape delay, but you're right in the middle of your policy manual review, that's goal 2. Gone through, I think you're on section I now, and your enrollment and population study is beginning in April, mid-April.
right, any other business this evening? Regular session?
I sent each one of you an email today, just put in a plug for Habitat for Humanity. We have a sign the stud board over here and some information for you if you're willing to put a donation into the envelope on the wall right here, and you get to put your signature on the stud that will actually be used in the home, Habitat for Humanity home at the corner of Norway and Oak Street in Silverton. I think it's a very creative approach, and plus I was told today that the city staff raised $250 and city council raised $250, so I challenged the school board and our administrative staff. And it's going to be in here for a couple of weeks, so if we can't do it tonight,
It's gonna stay right here.
it's going to stay right here.
Maybe by that May meeting, we can kind of, have some bragging rights
Yeah.
in the city.
There you go. Is the funds matched by the superintendent, or?
I guarantee the superintendent will be contributing.
I'm talking about math. Oh, sorry.
That's usually tear down your name.
I'm sure the answer would have to be yes, of course.
You could split it with the assistant.
Oh, that's a good.
You could, yeah, you could try that.
Include as many people as we can.
Okay, I think we're going downhill here. All right, I think this time we'll go ahead and adjourn regular session. We're going to go ahead and move into executive session per ORS 192.6602F to consider records exempt by law from public inspection. Thanks for coming. Okay, we'll go ahead and move out of executive session and back into regular session. Do we have any other business? All right, thanks for coming. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.